Welcome to our channel, Coral Jacks. I'm Jackie, and today we're delving into the history and legends surrounding the Bleeding Yew in Nevern. While researching this video, we quickly realised that to give any context to the conflicting stories around this magnificent yew tree, we needed to go back much further than the 700 years it's estimated to have lived. So, let's have a quick rundown on the 4,000 years or so leading up to the emergence of this tree and the church around it. We've put together a timeline of the events that we're going to talk about in the video, and also some chapters down below in case you want to skip ahead to any point in particular. 3 miles from Nevern is Pentre Ifan, a beautiful 5,500-year-old dolmen. It was commonly thought to be the remains of a burial chamber, the stones acting as the entrance to a larger covered mound. But there is a growing belief that it would have stood uncovered, as we see it today, to create a landmark or as a show of skill, the capstone intentionally balanced on narrow points to give the impression that it's floating. One legend claims that the 16-ton capstone was lifted into place by Arthur himself, and another that the site is a portal to the underworld. The Druids called this the womb of the great Celtic goddess Cerridwen. Another connection with her is inside the church at Nevern. A stone embedded in one of the windowsills is engraved with a cross made up of intertwined cords said to resemble a human figure. Some believe this cross is the representation of the great goddess Cerridwen herself. A few thousand years later, content with our floating rock portals and stone carvings, there's evidence that our ancestors were building fortified settlements in the area. Castell Henllys, a promontory fort and also only 3 miles from Nevern, is one of the most intensively studied hill forts in Britain. A farmstead settlement was also discovered next to the fort and is believed to have been occupied throughout the Romano-British period. Put this with suggested evidence that Nevern Castle was also built on a similarly sized Iron Age promontory fortification, we can assume Nevern to have been part of a fairly large and thriving community, possibly much larger than the modern day equivalent. For now, we're just going to skim over the Roman period as it takes us too far off topic and we don't have our own footage yet. But I wanted to mention that the Demetae were a Celtic people who inhabited this area, including Castell Henllys and likely Nevern, from the Iron Age and into the Roman era. The Demetae were at peace with the Roman Empire, which warred with their neighbours, and the Demetae eventually gave their name to the Welsh county of Dyfed. As we arrive in the early medieval period, written records become more frequent, and though there are numerous accounts of St. Brynach, most are unreliable, written 400 years later by monks intent on promoting the importance of the church. All we can seem to be sure of is that he founded the church in the year 540. It's popularly believed that he built on an existing sacred site, used by the Druids, and that the yew trees already played an important part in the function of the site. Is it possible that the Bleeding Yew is 1,500 years old rather than 700? Well, yes. It's unlikely, but it is possible. Another theory says Brynach chose Nevern as the site was already reasonably protected by the castle above the village, which had been a fortified stronghold since Iron Age times. Then on to Ogham. Ogham is a form of writing, and the name translates quite beautifully to the Celtic tree alphabet. As few as 400 Ogham inscriptions on stone monuments survive throughout Britain, and the largest number outside of Ireland are found in Pembrokeshire. The church here displays 2 bilingual Ogham stones, marked with both Ogham and Roman letter Latin inscriptions. Inside the church, the first of these stones is embedded into the windowsill, adjacent to the Celtic cross carving we mentioned earlier. It's known as the Maglacunnus stone and bears the inscription Maglacunnus, son of Clutar. It was rediscovered in 1904 after being reused as a lintel during structural repairs to the church in the 16th century. The second is in the churchyard. 5 foot tall and made of dolerite, the Vitalianus stone simply reads Vitalianus Emeritus, perhaps referring to an elite individual and commemorating his Christian identity. This stone has also been repurposed over the years and is recorded to have been returned to the church after functioning as a gatepost on a local farm. Together, these bilingual stones evidence Nevern as a place of importance in the centuries after the end of the formal Roman rule of Britannia. Further sacred importance is bestowed on Nevern as the Holy Kingdom book suggests that the one true cross of Christ, or at least part of it, had been brought to West Wales for the wedding of Owen, son of Hwyl Dda, the great Welsh king. It is said pilgrims would pray at the cross in Nevern in the hope for a vision of the true cross of Christ. In 1920, the Harleian manuscripts contained records of Nevern's Pilgrims Cross and reference that fragments of the one true cross of Christ may be located in Dyfed, some think hidden in a cave behind the Pilgrims Cross. The story goes that King Arthur called for the cross to be brought to him from a small village 5 miles from Nevern, Dinas Cross. He's said to have carried it on his shield into the Battle of Badon. It's presumed to have been hidden at Nevern Castle using a now collapsed tunnel that linked to the cave behind the Pilgrims Cross. As there had been fortifications on the site of the castle since the Iron Age, it could well have presented itself as a worthy guardian of the one true cross of Christ. This tale brought fame and pilgrims. Thousands upon thousands of pilgrims passed through Nevern on their way to St. David's, stopping at the cross to pray for the next stage of their journey. It is said that 3 pilgrimages to St. David's equalled 1 to Rome. And finally, we reach the estimated birth period of our now legendary yews. But why were they so respected? And why are they so difficult to date? Well, the yew has one remarkable trait in particular that answers both of these questions. It's able to regenerate itself by producing new roots from the centre. These roots feed and strengthen the ageing tree, allowing an old tree new life. Therefore, it's a perfect symbol of long life, rebirth and regeneration, no matter what the prevailing religion at the time. Merlin apparently said, "When root and branch shall change places, this thing shall be seen as a great wonder." The 3 most popular myths about the bleeding yew at Nevern are as follows. The first says that a monk was wrongly hanged for a crime he obviously did not commit, and that the tree continues to bleed in respect for him. Second, and more symbolic, is that the tree bleeds for all of the injustice in the world and will continue to do so until there is peace on earth. The third says that the bleeding will only stop when there is a true Welsh prince installed at Nevern. But whatever you believe, there is something undeniably special about this tree that makes every visit oddly meaningful. Stories of druids using the yew branches as staffs are common, but some go further and say that they used the staff as a guise to hide an unstrung bow. And the yew is certainly famed for the devastatingly effective bows crafted from its limbs. For example, Robert the Bruce is reported to have ordered the sacred yews at the priory in Argyll to be made into bows for his men before a victorious battle. These ancient trees were held sacred by druids in pre-Christian times and came to symbolise death and resurrection in Celtic culture, partly because of its regenerative properties, but also the Celts will have been familiar with the toxicity of the tree's needles, contributing to its connection with death. The yew's toxicity has somewhat limited practical uses in humans, though a homeopathic tincture can be made of the young shoots, and the berry flesh has been used by herbalists to treat a variety of ailments. When it comes to dating a tree, the most accurate way is to count the rings in the trunk. But at around 400 years old, the yew's heartwood decays, leaving them hollow and making this method redundant. The technique currently used to date yews involves measuring the trunk's girth at a determined height and comparing this to data going back around 300 years to give an estimate. But as trees grow differently in different environments, and yews have wildly different shapes, the estimate is often disputed. If the bleeding yew is indeed 700 years old, this plants it at a time when the church as we see it today was being constructed, perhaps lending credence to the idea that this avenue of yews was planted by the church for the church, inspired by earlier sacred traditions, but by this time so intertwined with the church that, like so many other traditions, the origins were obscured and forgotten. Either way, there's evidence that vast amounts of time and money were invested in the area, and among other things, the church was expanded and enhanced. The popularity of the pilgrim route stands out as a large source of revenue for the church and local communities. It's estimated that at the beginning of this period, the church came into the possession of the 13-foot-tall Nevern Cross, considered to be one of the finest carved crosses in Britain, carved with intricate knotworks, ringwork, Greek swastikas, and other geometric patterns. Details of its construction show close parallels with the Carew cross, and it's assumed that both were produced by the same artist around the 11th century. Nevern Castle enters history in the early 12th century, when records show that the Anglo-Norman lord Robert Fitzmartin conquered the lands at Nevern. Some sources simply state that the castle's remains are from the 12th century. Others claim that this castle, and more locally, are built on the remains of earlier fortifications from the Iron Age. Thanks for watching the video, and please let us know in the comments if you've heard any other stories about this site, or if there's any other yews and ancient sites you think we should visit. I can promise we'll be visiting a lot more historic sites that have yews this year, and we're always looking for more details to add clarity or colour.